So who were you?
I feel like for a lot of children of divorced parents, because you like this beautiful picture of what life is supposed to be and like this love that you hear about in all of the like Disney movies and stuff, like you realize that that is not reality at a pretty young age. I was just so focused on like trying to win their love and trying to like be the best version of myself. So I feel like, and that has an ugly side, you know?
Well, hello, lovely listener, and welcome back to another episode of Breaking the Blocks. I'm your host, Rachel Pearman, and I am super excited about my guest that I'm bringing to you today. You know when you meet someone and you think, how do I know you so well, and yet I've only talked to you a couple of times? I feel like I met her in a previous life, like she was my sister or something. She has got so many amazing stories to tell. Hannah Austin is her name. She is an amazing embroiderer. She works with hoops and she creates these fantastic artworks. They really are works of art. Not only is she an amazing artist and she's so talented, but oh my goodness me, she is a lovely, genuine, authentic human being. And the subjects we talked today were about grief and loss and how we have changed as people, how we've grown, how she's grown. And she is, of course, a mother, and she talks about how she is trying to create a better life, an experience of life for her children. It was a wonderful interview. So sit back, relax. I hope that you enjoy it. And maybe you might be able to learn some things that could help you overcome some of the same issues if you're facing them in your life. All right then. Are we ready?
I believe so.
I'm not so sure.
Okay.
But let's try it.
If we have to record this many times, that's okay. We just get to hang out. I try to
Exactly.
approach it as like it's fine.
Well, we're all new to this world of podcasts, and we should mention
It's
your
so,
podcast, Hannah,
yeah.
because it is Unstitched Pod.
Unstitched Pod for short. Yep. And it is Vika, who is also known as Vika Space on all platforms. And we have become really good friends online, and to the point where we were going to work on a collaboration together. She decided to move from working a whole nother job to becoming a full-time artist. And very jokingly, I said, just come to the States. We'll work on our collaboration together. And then she was like, I think I could actually do it. And then 3 weeks later, she was staying in my home for a week or two. And that kind of that friendship, we just realized like, oh, this would be kind of fun to record because I think other people could relate. So we just talk about all things like small business and art and like the culture around that and how we feel like there's a shift happening, which is really refreshing. Moving more away from gatekeeping and more about like building community and supporting one another. And so, yeah, it's just like a recording of the two of us just hanging out and having fun. So,
Yeah, well, I think
yeah.
it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And I came across it the other day by chance. So
Oh,
your
yay.
algorithm is working somehow because
Woo-hoo.
there you were. I think maybe my iPhone picked up the fact that I was talking about you.
Yeah.
All good things, all good things. But yeah, no, it's interesting you say about the community building because obviously you and I spoke. We've only
Yeah.
spoken once before, some time
Yeah.
ago
But
when
it was
I
fabulous.
reached out to you. Oh,
Yeah.
it was fabulous. I do remember what you said to me actually, because if anybody is listening to this podcast right now, dear listener, I am desperately trying to get Hannah to come and do an online class at
You
Crafty
know, I
Monkeys.
think this year might be the year.
Mm, We'll be touching base as soon as this interview is
No, I
over, my
won't.
lady. You're not escaping me again now. That's it.
We'll
We're
do it.
putting a
Yeah.
date in. No, it is good. But it was lovely to meet you, and I have talked about like energy, attracting energy on so many of
Yeah.
the other interviews I've done, and I do think we are drawn to the right
Totally.
people. And when I say the right people, I think if we have lessons to learn in this life, if we need to grow, if we need to change, I think sometimes we can be sent tricky situations and tricky
Yeah.
people because perhaps we're
Hmm.
tricky people because we need to learn lessons.
Yeah.
And I think that when you start, getting into a peaceful place, as I'm finding I am, Hannah, that you start meeting more kind of grounded souls or people on your wavelength.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Totally. And I think that comes with like purposefully working on trying to better yourself. Because same. I feel like, especially, I've grown so much with my small business. There have, like, at the very beginning of my small business, I feel like I acted a lot, I don't want to say immaturely, but like it comes with like just learning more about how you are running things. Like everybody, when you start, you want to put on this facade of like knowing everything and like being competent and professional, when the reality is almost no one knows what they're doing. We're all just kind of faking it until we figure it out. And I feel like I've gotten to a point now where I feel like I kind of know what I'm doing. And that confidence in myself, I feel like then I'm looking for other people that have that same feeling, because we've gone around all of the stuff that's kind of like unnecessary, and we don't want to waste our energy on like the negative things or like putting other people down. It's more about just like wanting to improve everything. So I feel you so much there.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when I talked to you, Hannah, which I mean, time goes so quickly. I bet it was a year ago. I bet it was a
Yeah,
year ago that I
yeah,
talked to you. I wasn't fully sure even then of what I was doing. I knew I wanted to build this community, but
yeah,
as I said to you at that time, I don't sew. I'm not a quilter.
yeah,
I completely respect it, and I do craft. People, if they're watching on YouTube, will
yeah,
see my lovely pictures behind me.
yeah.
Well, I say lovely. Um, they are to
They
me,
are
just like
lovely.
children.
They are
Our
lovely.
children are always lovely to ourselves, but
Yes.
perhaps not
Mm.
to other people. Um, but I said to you that I kind of felt a bit of a fraud, really, in the
Yeah.
world, in the crafting world. I was like, well, people will think, well, how can you bring a community kid together? You're not even a crafter. But I feel like now I absolutely know my place and I'm
Yeah.
confident of it, and I believe in the community and I believe in what I'm doing. So yeah, I think that it's interesting how you and I have, as the Americans say, circled back round.
Yes. We did circle back around. It is. Yeah. There are so many different ways that we can benefit from one another. And
Mm.
I also feel like this notion of like having certain skills, specifically in art or crafting, like that, I feel like that mentality of like, well, you have to know how to do those things in order to like benefit the community. I feel like that way of thinking is in the past. And I think we're moving forward to a
I
place where,
absolutely
you
agree.
know, um,
Yeah.
because sometimes we need people that don't know our art form very well to give us some like other perspectives and insights that it's like we get tunnel vision. So having someone else, like, I try and befriend people that are in all sorts of art forms and backgrounds, because sometimes they'll say something and I'm like, huh, I've never considered that before, and it
Yeah.
changes everything. So I'm glad you're
Yeah.
part of the community.
Oh, well, thank you. It's
Yeah.
nice to be a part of the community.
Yeah.
I really mean that. I think it is a great community. There are so many wonderful, giving,
Hmm.
open people. And the reason I started my podcast was because I had run so many classes where
Yeah.
people just told these amazing stories. I remember one of the most interesting stories was a lady. She was quite quiet in the class, and I
Hmm.
noticed that she was in a sun-filled room, and she had
Mm.
quite a lot of tattoos, and she was probably the youngest in the class.
Oh,
And she said she was living in Mexico, but she was English. And I was like, okay, I want to know your story. Anyway,
yeah.
she sort of joked a couple of times. I said, what I want to know how you've got to Mexico. Anyway, at the end of the class, she said, would you like to hear my story? And everybody in the class was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Who is this woman? She was so openly honest. And she said, well, I am a recovering alcoholic.
Oh,
She said, crafting is my savior. She said, a few years ago, I would never have thought I would have sat down and sewed, but here I am. It saved my life. And she said, I was in a very abusive family, and they were in England. And the best thing to do was get as far away as I could from those people. And I did. And I just decided one day to pack up my bags and move to Mexico. And here I am. And then she talks a bit more, and it was everybody's jaws dropped. And I just thought,
yeah.
wow. And that is what creativity can do for you. And so going back
Yeah.
to what you said there, Hannah, about you don't need to be an expert in one field or
Mm-mm.
specialized. You just need to start opening yourself to your own creativity. And I think that we're all born creative. If you give a 2-year-old
Absolutely.
a pencil, they're going
Yes.
to start playing with it. They're not going to go, I'd rather do some math. They are going to start drawing with that pencil.
Yeah.
And then I think as life, takes over, we have to pay bills and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we stop the creativity. And then people say, oh, I'm not creative. I
Yeah.
think everybody is creative. I mean, I have to say, Hannah, we have to talk about the hair. If anybody has followed you on your Instagram account, I mean, your hair looks quite, can I just say the word? I'm not even sure. I don't even like the word normal, because what is normal? But for you,
It's
I mean,
blue. But
is
yes,
it blue?
it's blue.
It's dark.
It's a very dark blue. But it's blue right now. This is probably the most tame my hair has been though in
Yeah.
5
I
years.
love I love your hair. I mean, it's rainbow. I just wake up to check out your Instagram feed to see what
Oh,
you've done
you're
today. Green, pink, yellow,
you
all the
know,
colors.
speaking on creativity, I do believe there was a study done, and I will have to look it up and send it to you after we talk so that you can have cite it if you would like.
Yeah,
That
fantastic.
talked about they studied a group of babies, um, toddlers, I believe, and they gave them significant tests to try and discover like if they could find geniuses. And I can't remember exactly what the protocol was for meeting that criteria, but these babies, they had it was like a large number of them met all the qualifications to grow up as a genius. And as they got older, they kept giving this same group of babies a test. And what they came to find is that the number was diminished not because the kids weren't capable of being really intelligent, it was because they were cut off from their creativity, because they were
Mm,
given tasks and things that had like specific answers, a certain method to do it. And because they didn't have the ability to be creative, to think on their own, that's actually what killed like the ability to become this like genius level as they got older. And so the number diminished significantly as they got older. And I feel like there is so much truth to this idea that there are so many people who walk around like, "Oh, I don't make art. I'm a maker instead of or like instead of a crafter or an artist." And or like I'm not really good at anything like that. Even creative in terms of like singing or making music, like I
mhm,
can't do that.
mhm,
And but almost every single child when they're born does naturally sing, does naturally play, does naturally want to draw and color. And at some point in time, someone told them something, or they made something they were really proud of and they gave it to an adult of some kind and they weren't given the same response that they wanted. And then all of a sudden in their brains, they were like, nope, this isn't for me. And then they just don't do it anymore. And
yeah,
I feel like our generation is kind of like making up for that. I know so many adults who are like, I've decided I'm going to start watercolor this year. I'm not good at it, but I'm just going to try because I always wanted to do it when I was older. And it's like we've given ourselves the space, the opportunity to be able to like just go for it. And now, as we've gotten older, like my hair, to bring it back around, I used to teach. I taught elementary music, preschool through fifth grade. I loved the teaching part. I really miss that part. I miss making music with children. I miss playing instruments with them and singing. Thankfully, I have my own kids. I can still kind of do some of that with them, but I couldn't do anything like it's changed a lot. I think teachers now, they can have tattoos, they can have piercings, you can have kind of crazy colored hair. But when I was first teaching, I dyed my hair what I believe is a very modest red color. And I was told by an administrator, you're gonna need to tone that down a little bit. We
oh,
want to be and I'm in an elementary school. We want to be professional. And so when I left teaching and I became a parent, I was like, I don't have anybody telling me what to do anymore. I'm going to dye my hair. And that's kind of and then people started recognizing me from my hair. And now I don't know if I could ever go back to normal hair color.
yeah, that normal. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's a
That's interesting.
but for me, it's like
Yeah.
this is a way for me to be creative, and I get to go to
Exactly.
another artist, and I get to tell her, "Hey, I think I wanna do this to my hair this time," and she pulls it off, and this is like it's blue, like, I maybe I should just move closer to the camera so you can like, it's very
I can see it now. I can see it.
but from far
Yeah.
away, it does kinda just look like black, and,
Yeah.
I'm sure a rainbow will appear shortly.
I'm sure. I'm sure it will.
But it is a signature, I guess, of me now. People recognize, like, my hair almost before they recognize anything else, and they're like, "Oh, it's Hannah." I'm grateful they stick
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. No, but that's it's good. And like you say, it just I loved what you just said there as well. You went to another artist, which is the hairdresser, and
Yes.
gave her permission to
Yeah.
play and to come out with
Oh,
color.
it's so fun.
Um, that's great. So you are kind of spreading that joy as well. But
Yeah.
seriously, it was another artist who said a similar thing to me. Victoria Vanderlaan. I was interviewing
Mhm.
her, and she said, you know, people who say they're not creative, she said, I will say to them, have you ever worn, a red hat or a coloured hat? And they might
Yeah.
go, yeah. And have you coordinated it with some coloured gloves? Yeah. Well, then you've been creative. You're being
Yeah.
creative. We're creative in our lives. We make up our
Totally.
own life stories.
Yeah.
That's been creative.
It's
Yeah.
I mean, even when it comes to, like, decorating a space, if, like, well, did you buy anything for your home? Did you buy throw pillows or a blanket, or what do your cups look like? Like, that's all people curating to what they like. That's artistry and creativity. It might be a
Yeah.
really, like, a small level, but we're all doing it.
Yes,
Yeah.
we are. We are. Well, we should talk about what else you're known for as well,
Oh.
because you create these amazing. You're going to say, "Oh, what else was I known for?" Well, don't you wear sort of short shorts and flip flops and wander around the countryside? No, I don't know if you do actually, but you do strike me as that kind of girl. I can see you as a girl who walks around with little flippy floppies, and because you are very inspired by nature.
I am, yeah.
Obviously, I really believe and love walking in nature. I love being by the sea.
Yeah.
I have quite an interest in the moon and the kind of gravitational pull it has on our
Yes.
moods.
Mhm.
Um, full moons, half moons, how they affect communication. And some people will go, what a load of mumbo. But if
Oh,
you actually look into it
I am right
and
there
you were
with
to
you.
plot your life,
I
yes,
think we talked about
yes.
this last time. I
Maybe
think
we did. I can't
I think we
remember.
touched base a little bit about because I am fully right there with you. The fact that when you can find like in the oldest calendars of time where women tracking their cycles, and I find it very interesting that the moon has a cycle of 28 days and most women have a cycle of 28 days, and that there's 13 moon cycles and most women have 13 cycles in the year. It all how can we not? When we can feel the gravitational pull and the waves and we see it in the tides, how could we not have some sort of impact on space?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I'm right there with you. I don't think it's a bunch of baloney or anything. I think people have it's kind of the nice part about being individuals. We can all believe what we want to believe, and there's no harm in being curious about that. I'm right there
But
with
but
you.
I think also it can help you as well, though, Hannah, because
Yeah.
I have felt now I'm more aware of it. If there are days when, for no reason known to me, I am feeling anxious or I'm feeling depressed or I have this strong surges of energy, and I'm like, what's
Yeah.
going on? I look in the calendar. Oh, guess what? There's a new moon or there's a full moon, and
It
it
really
always
is.
happens that way.
Yeah. I mean, there's a
So
reason why parents are always like, "There must be a full moon tonight. My kids are crazy."
yes, yes,
Those
it's
phrases
true.
happen
Mm,
because of something, not just because
mm.
someone one day was like, let's start talking about the moon and our crazy kids."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love your pieces. So you are obviously inspired by nature
Yeah.
and by going out and about. Do you also um, use nature as a way to ground yourself? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I grew up with a father who absolutely loves the outdoors. Super blessed that he grew up in very small town Minnesota, which is like just in the middle of nowhere. It's beautiful. It is a beautiful place. And because of that, when you grow up in like the countryside, you it's like all you have to do is actually go and, explore outside. And so he raised us hiking and camping and fishing, and he is a hunter. And so I grew up appreciating nature and just life outside in general. And when we moved here from the Midwest, my husband and I, he got into the university here to get his PhD. And so we picked up our lives from the Midwest and we moved across the country, but we decided to spend like a month exploring. So instead of rushing or flying, we sold almost everything, packed a 6x12 trailer, and we hauled it behind our van. We loaded our 2 kids at the time in the van. And then we would visit with friends and family along the way. We stopped at hotels and stuff, but we went to national parks, state parks. And that's actually where the idea for my small business came from, because I took so many pictures on our hikes and our explorations, and I was just so struck by how beautiful our country is. I mean, it's beautiful everywhere, but like the Pacific Northwest is next level. And so the summit of Eugene, the piece that you found me for, that's the tallest hike that you can do in Eugene. It's the highest point. Eugene's actually pretty low in terms of like compared to sea level, where it's a pretty low elevation. But if you go to the top of, it's called Spencer's Butte. If you go to the top, you can see like all of the Willamette Valley. And if it's a really clear day, you can see the Three Sisters, which are, it's like a mountain range. It's beautiful up there. And I started taking panoramic pictures every time we would go up to the top. And and when we would leave, like if I closed my eyes, I would try to remember what I saw. And it would get to a point where I like could remember very distinct things about it, but I couldn't remember everything. And so I was like, I wonder if I could play on that. So I made the center hoop with like the stuff that I always can remember. And then I just tried to remember little bits and pieces. And that's why all the little hoops came, like it's like little portals. Um, but I am very inspired by the outdoors. All my pieces aren't necessarily directly places. Like you can see some of them around me. Sometimes they're just made up landscapes that I just feel like doing. But a lot of them are inspired. They're not direct replicas, but they're very inspired by real places.
Do you find as well, Hannah, that if you don't get out into the outdoors, if, say, for example, the weather was bad and you were stuck indoors for a few days, or if you had to, go away to a conference or something and you were stuck in a hotel, do you start to get kind of quite itchy and a need to get out?
Yeah, I love a good day in. It's Eugene, well, Oregon, the Pacific Northwest. We are known for like dreary days. Kind of like I feel like parts of the UK are also known for that. Um, so there are days
I
where
think the
I
UK is known for that.
just
The
just
UK,
all
not parts, just all of it.
so that like dreary kind of misty drizzle that happens almost year round here. It's beautiful during the summertime, but there's still usually a little bit of rain. And so there are days where I just don't want to go outside. I'll, just sit and craft, and that's fine. But almost every day I go outside, even if it's just to like go for a little walk. My kids go to school 2 blocks down, and I try and walk to and from school when I can, because even just that little bit of fresh air and just like feeling the ground underneath me uh, helps to kind of make me feel a little bit more present in my body. So yeah, I am that kind of person. During my conferences in college, I would take off my shoes and go outside. So,
See, I said flippy floppy and shorts. I can see it. I can absolutely see it. I can
yeah,
see it.
yeah, I am that person.
You are that person. Well, this is good.
Yeah.
So the question is then, Hannah, I mean, you come across to me as being a really, all round good egg.
Oh,
You are,
thank you.
well, you are. You're so generous of spirit and joyful and grounded. Um, was there a time in your life when you weren't grounded, or you went through a period of anxiety, or you had anything blocking you?
Oh, yeah.
I thought you were going to say all the time then, weren't you?
Oh,
You were. You were going
yeah.
to say all the
Yeah.
time.
I think I made a promise to myself. So my grandmother, the person who like inspired everything, most people who know me, I talk about her frequently. She's the one who taught me how to quilt, how to home make, how to cook, how to bake, um, how to paint, how to hand sew. She did everything, the basics of everything. My love of almost everything stems from her. Um, she was like, I don't know if I ever saw her upset with anyone. She was just always like so happy, and she was always so grateful for people if they chose to spend time with her. Every interaction, she just always seemed so grateful for it. And she had early onset dementia, like it hit her
Mm.
relatively young. My grandfather passed away when I was 2, so she was alone for a huge portion of her life. And so she learned how to do everything on her own and was very self sufficient. She never asked for anything, but slowly, what we didn't know, slowly she was losing her mind, and she didn't know how, she was proud, she didn't want to like tell anybody that it was happening. And I watched her go from being able to just enjoy everything about life to just being kind of like this vacant shell of a person, like you could see little bits every once in a while of the spark, but and that was really hard. But when that happened, in 2000, I think it started around like 2008, 2009. I made a promise to myself that I was going to try and approach life in the same way she did, because dementia is hereditary in a lot of ways, like that. So that could be me in 40 years, 50 years if I'm lucky. And I want to make sure that I have lived life, because that was like a comforting thing to me. If she was having a bad day, I would just, she lived her life so fully that I'm going to try and approach life that way. But that also comes with like this like impending anxiety of like we don't have very much time. And um if I am in my feelings, I used to just try and like push it down, which for anybody who suffers from anxiety or from like self-doubt or depression or anything,
It's the worst thing to
that's
do.
yeah, that's
Mm.
not good. So,
Mm-mm.
I think I've just gotten better at being open about it. Which I mean, that comes into play with art too, with like imposter syndrome and just the anxiety we feel around like trying to present something that's we're so vulnerable and it's so important, a little piece of us, to just like gift that to the world and hope that it's received well. And sometimes if it's not, that is like so soul crushing. Um, and I make mistakes just like anybody else. I think I've done a lot of growing and choosing to be on social media the way that I do. No one forces me to do it, but social media is a free way for us to publicize ourselves, right? To like that's our advertising. And I choose to be a certain way on social media. I've chosen to pretty much just be as authentic as I can be. I talk about things that people might feel uncomfortable talking about, and I know that comes with like me. I'm going to get some pushback sometimes, and I'm going to make some mistakes sometimes. And I think for me, social media is like a way for me to stay accountable. Like if other people who know me and know like my spirit and know like my intention, if they're like, that feels a little off, Hannah, like you did this. I want you to think about it. And I will take a step back, and it forces me to grow and to make changes and to admit that I'm human. And it's also for me, it's provided a wonderful opportunity for me to like get to know other people even more and know that I can trust them to tell me, "Hey, that maybe was not the best choice," or "I think maybe you should think of it this way." Um, so I by no means am perfect, but I do try to stay positive, and I do try to be open to meeting other people and experiences and conversations, because I think ultimately life is just so short, and like I want to make sure that I try and approach it every day as like this is such a gift. I don't know if it's going to be something I have tomorrow. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I have had pregnancy loss was my biggest, and just loss through memory, like my grandmother. Um 2019, 2020 were hard for a lot of us, but I lost my grandmother the day after I gave birth to my son, my youngest. And then I lost my stepfather, who was an incredible person, and that was really tough. And then I, through that process, lost the relationship with my mother. We are no longer communicating, and and miscarriages in there and everything. So I,
Wow, that's a lot to deal
there
with. That's a
a lot of
lot.
loss and grief and loss when if you've lived a life where you haven't experienced a ton of loss before. Like I was very privileged. I hadn't really lost too many people in my life in a way where it would like hit me so hard. And then all of a sudden I entered like my young adulthood and lost a lot of really significant people, and all of a sudden I was like, "Whoa, why do I have what is this like thing I'm having? Like I feel like I can't breathe." Like, I remember I was in college, and I remember a friend of mine was like, "Hannah, I think you're having a panic attack." And I was like, "What is that?" I had never experienced, um, as we've gotten older, now I'm in my mid-30s, and so I can now I can put a name to it. I know when it's happening. Um, yeah. So there have definitely been hard, hard moments, and I have not always been a bubbly, nice person. I have grown. So,
First of all, I'm sorry for your loss.
oh, thank
That's
you.
because that's
Yeah.
a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, I can appreciate exactly where you are because my grandma started with dementia when she was 64,
Mm,
and she
so tough.
died. Yeah, she died about, I think she's like 79 or 80 years
Yeah.
old. And I had this moment with my grandma actually, where as you've said, Alzheimer's is such a horrible
Mm,
disease, and that person is going and going and going, and there are moments, aren't there, where they're there. But I remember I went to see her, and this was, towards the end, and she really just by this point was just sat in a chair, completely devoid
yeah.
of any personality or any of my grandma. Really, it was just the outer shell was there.
Yeah.
And I went and I used to sit with her, and me and my mum would talk, and she would just be next to us. And I got engaged, and this was in 2020.
Mm.
And I got engaged in New York, actually, not to a New Yorker, to an Englishman who I'm now still married to, by the way,
Oh,
in
good.
case anybody thinks, what happened to the engagement? I'm still married. And, but I went to see my grandma. And so I sat with her, and I held her hand, and I just said, look, grandma, look at my ring. I got engaged. I got engaged. And for that second, she looked at me and went, oh, Rachel.
Mm.
Oh.
She was there.
And we all just
Yeah.
stopped.
Yeah.
And then I saw the light go.
Mhm.
But it was like for that second, she shared that
Oh,
incredibly important
you made me
moment.
cry.
I don't know, from
That is, yeah. Oh, it's such
so
a thief of joy, that disease. So,
yeah, it's horrid. So I
yeah.
absolutely agree with you in terms of you have to live your life.
Yeah, being faced with your mortality is a little shocking. Yeah.
So I want to go back to you though, Hannah, and say, so you said at the end that you weren't always this, bubbly, happy
Yeah.
person. So who were you?
You know, I also am a child of divorce, so we've got so much in common.
I know. I know.
My father is a lot more emotionally present now, but military, and so his way of showing love to us as a family was going and providing for us, right? Like going and doing so. He was gone a lot. And my stepmother is a wonderful soul, and she, along with my grandmother, pretty much raised me. And but you kind of approach life being just really bitter. I feel like for a lot of
Mm, mm,
children of divorced parents, because you like this beautiful picture of what life is supposed to be, and like this love that you hear about in all of the like Disney movies and stuff. Like you realize that that is not reality at a pretty young age. And my parents hated each other, like could not be in a room together. I it was I the what now I now know is anxiety during like graduations and stuff, when the two of them would be in the same space, because like they never lived in the same state. Like they disliked each other so much. They like moved on opposite sides of the country. Um, I It just does something to you. And then I feel like I always was trying to be the best I could possibly be at everything. And I didn't really take into consideration how that would affect other people. I was just so focused on like trying to win their love and trying to like be the best version of myself. So I feel like and that has an ugly side, and I can forgive myself for being that way, but I feel like not that I wasn't unkind, but I just wasn't aware of other people as so many people are when they're younger. I was just so in my own head. Um, and so, I'm sure there are people that, and I think about it often, it keeps me up at night sometimes. I think about people like, oh, I used to be so close with them. And then I just kind of left. Not because I was like, I don't want to be in your life anymore, but it was very much just like, I don't have the capacity to be there for you because I'm dealing with my own stuff. And I can see that now, but back then it was like, whatever, I'm doing me. I'm trying to survive. You know, as so
Were
many of
you
us have
also
done.
were you also leaving that person as well before they could leave you? Do
Yeah,
you think
oh,
there were
totally. I think so many of us
mm,
do that, right? Like, and I also have a lot of tendencies that I've realized are like trauma related, where I am very aware of everybody else's feelings now. Like, I moved out of that, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh gosh, now I care how people think about me. Now it's not necessarily about trying to be the best I can be to please my parents. Now I'm an adult. It's no longer about pleasing my parents. So then all of a sudden it was like, wow, hyper awareness of like, no, I can clearly tell don't like me. So I'm just like, whatever, I'm not gonna like you then. It is a very interesting thing to navigate life that way. And I am trying my very hardest to raise my children to be aware of other people's emotions, but also that it's not your responsibility to manage their emotions, but also be aware of other people and be kind. And that is parenthood is rough. Um, Also, I think parenthood is one of the reasons why I feel like I'm doing better as at being a better person, because it forces you, right? Like, you are the example that they see. So it forces me to take a step back to think like, maybe I shouldn't judge those people so much. Maybe I shouldn't spend so much time thinking about all the negative crap about that person's life. I should focus on myself.
because you know when you said about the bitterness, let's just take it right back to there. Because that's what I used to be. I used to be so
So
bitter and
bitter. Yeah.
angry.
Yeah.
I blame America. I blame America because I don't blame America. I'm joking. But what I'm going to say is, I used to watch American shows, as you
Mm.
just said there,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it was the mashed potato.
Of
You know, they had
course.
the big bowls of mashed potato
Yes.
and
The family
the
style
Waltons.
meals. Yes.
Oh, there you go. The Waltons. By the way, I
Yes.
was in love with John Boy, but the Waltons, and it was like everybody was sharing. Good night, Grandma. Good night. Everybody is so happy. And I wanted that life. And instead, I was this only kid with a
Oh yeah.
divorced parents who
Mm-hmm.
also hated each other.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at my grandma's, I'd moved areas, I'd moved locations,
Yeah.
I'd lost my friends, I'd lost my school. We went from quite
Yes.
a nice area to a rough area.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting bullied. I really liked
Yeah.
drama. So I remember people used to say, oh, Rachel, she's a right snob because I like drama.
Yeah.
So I was bullied. And it was like, whoa, this is a lot to deal with. So as I got older in my life, I was so bitter about this.
Mm-hmm.
Why hadn't I come from a nice family? Why hadn't I? And I drew more of that into my life. It was the universe
Yeah.
going, listen, listen, you can't. But I would draw more of it in. And I don't know about you, Hannah, but I was, I remember saying to people, why does drama always follow me around?
Yes.
Why is this crazy situation happening or this one? Guess what? Because I was drawing it into
Yeah.
myself.
Oh, I used to say like I could write books. I could have a whole like
Yes.
trilogy on drama on the stuff that happens in my life.
Yeah. And you know why? For me, it was because the one thing that I had never had through my life as a child was peace. And
Mm-hmm.
so, what you do is you try and create your home life because that's what you know and that's
I
what you've been
know.
programmed.
Yes.
So, you create that because then that, you know, when you meet someone, you go, oh, you feel like home to me. Well,
Yes.
if your home is traumatic,
That's what you
that's
were
not a
going
good
for.
thing.
Yes. Yeah. And to it's hard to be a cycle breaker for that too. There are so many people that are experiencing like being a cycle breaker. Like I said, like I no longer have a relationship with my mother. I have attempted several times, and it finally got to a point where I was like, why am I trying so hard to make a relationship happen when you clearly are not trying. My one stipulation was that she go to therapy. I just wanted her to try and work on herself because she would never apologize for anything she had done. And she would never admit that anything you've ever happened. Maybe I don't even need an apology. I just need you to like acknowledge the things that you did. And then I had children of my own, and all of a sudden I was like, I could never do the things that you did to me. I could never do that to my children. And so I approached that as like, whoa, I why am I doing this? And there's this like, you like have to, they're your family. You like have to make it work. And I finally realized I don't actually. I could choose who my family is. My family does not have to be blood. My family can be whoever is there, whoever's present, who puts in the love that I try and give out, that they give it back, that they love me unconditionally. And there are so many of us that are trying, just finally waking up to it. Like, I don't want to be like my mom. I don't want to walk into life expecting everybody else to always correct themselves. I don't want to approach life just being angry all the time and feeling like entitled to other people's attention. And it's hard to do that. It's hard to like step back and say, whoa, I am not attracting the best people because I'm not being my very best. Like, nobody wants to admit that you have like ugly parts of yourself. That Who wants to do that? But
Yeah.
um honestly, entering the last decade of my life, I feel like I've really worked hard to like put boundaries in place to just keep my peace intact, to protect my children's peace. And it's so hard, but it's also like very rewarding. And it feels
Mm,
so good to be able to say like, that's not my drama anymore. I get to walk away from that. I don't have to be a part of that experience anymore. I am over here on my own and we're doing fine. So,
yeah. Since I mean, you've got your boundaries in place so much earlier than me. I mean, it's taken me all these years to work myself out.
yeah.
But don't you feel that when you put those boundaries in place, and I loved what you said there about this is not good for me. It's kind of like this is not my higher self. This is not where I
Yeah.
should be. So stop doing those things. Don't you feel that if you do it, which believe me, I feel like breaking those cycles, those emotional cycles, is as hard as if you are trying to break alcohol
Yeah, it's
addiction,
an addiction for
nicotine. It's
sure.
an
Yes.
addiction. It's an
Yeah.
addiction to the drama. It's an addiction to what the thing is. I always used to try to fill the void within myself by other people. You
Yeah.
make me happy.
Yeah.
You do it.
Yeah.
You do that for me. Why are you not making me happy?
Yeah.
Or wanting that attention. And it's only just, I think recently, it's only
Yeah.
just recently that I've realized no one can fill that void
Mm.
except me.
Mhm.
And actually, that when you seek all that attention and you get the wrong attention, it just makes you feel even emptier.
Oh yeah.
You have to fill. I know it's
Yeah.
that classic saying, you have to fill your own cup before you pour into someone else's, but
Mhm.
you do. But as you say, facing those behaviors is very difficult.
It's
It's very
so
difficult to look at
difficult.
the
Which
icky parts.
art is a huge part of, I think, how many of us have kind of worked through that. Like, being forced, yes, I could make art around other people, and I often do. I often will stitch with friends or, in public spaces. But the majority of the time that I'm working by myself in my own, in this space, in my office, and I am stitching, and it forces you to slow down, not scroll on your phone, not be distracted by other things, but like just forces you to slow life down a little bit and to reflect on what you are doing for yourself. Because it is, I don't know, I feel like I was raised to think it's selfish to like think of like you can't possibly put yourself first. Like you need to make yourself as small as possible. You don't want to be an inconvenience to other people. So figure out a way to like make yourself as small as possible. Always care about what other people think and always try and make sure that everybody else is happy. And then it leaves you with this like hollow feeling of, oh my, okay, well, and then you feel so selfish and like self-centered if you're like, well, what about me? I can I care about what I think about myself? Can I care about making something for myself because it feels good for me? And I think many people are now starting to realize, like, oh, whoa, I should love, like, self-love, that whole, like, radical movement that is happening. I love so much, especially in the art world. But making art has forced me to, like, sit down and think. Like, I'm not making this for anybody else. The moment I start making art for other people, I probably am gonna quit. I make it for myself. I make it to from whatever I'm feeling at that time, I put it into my artwork. And then that's how I like process everything. And I think it's truly helped me find peace because I can look at something, I'm like, I made that. It's beautiful. I put that out in the world. I did
Yes.
that.
I wrote exactly those words today
Hmm.
on somewhere on my the place where I have to load my podcasts.
Yeah.
You have to write a piece about what the podcast is about. And I
Oh.
wrote in that, if you are telling yourself you're not creative, please try it, because you will have so much pride in
Mm-hmm.
what you achieve. And then you'll be really pleased with yourself,
Oh,
and not in a kind of
totally.
ego way.
Yeah.
But I get what you mean, because I do my tea time tutorials every Friday
Yeah.
with Gary, and we do a little mindful exercise. And at first, when we started it, it was to kind of let's get crafty monkeys out there, let's
Yeah.
see who we can attract. But it's actually become my time that I give myself every week.
Yeah.
And there are times when I've been so up against it with stuff I've got to do, and Gary will message me and go, "Are you still up for recording in half an hour?" I go, "Yes." Sometimes begrudgingly,
Yeah.
thinking I've
It's
got
like,
to get
oh,
this YouTube content out. But as soon as I sit down, and I never know what exercise he's going to give me as well, he just says, grab a paper, pen, and da da da.
yeah.
As soon as I sit down and we start crafting together, and we have 25 minutes where the two of us forget that we're filming and we just
Mm-hmm.
craft, it's fantastic. And at the end,
You feel
when
so
I
much better.
create my piece, I feel so much better, because
Yeah.
first of all, I've created that piece in terms of like peace and tranquility. But then when I hold my piece to the camera, and then Gary says, "Wow, look at what you're learning." And you go, "Yes, I am." And that is such a good feeling.
Oh,
So
so
I think
good.
creativity is so important.
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to talk to you about, because you mentioned about the anxiety as well there,
Mm.
and panic attacks. And once again, I'm with you. But how did you get over your panic attacks and your anxiety? Do you still have the panic attacks?
No. A lot of it
No.
stemmed from the relationship with my mother. So
Mm,
ending that has helped a lot. Honestly, when I think back on my anxiety attacks, they almost always happen when I was trying to sustain that relationship, when it was not
yeah.
beneficial, when it was
Yeah.
super detrimental to my mental health. I I I don't want to necessarily say in my former life, but I was a singer. That was like a huge part of, and it still is a huge part of my identity. I don't sing nearly as much as I used to, but I I'm a soprano, and I sang professionally for like seven years post graduating from college. I was in a rock band, so like music was my way. Music and art have always been pretty heavy influences on me. And at the time when my panic attacks were really hitting me, I just put everything into my practice of singing. I graduated with a
Mm,
vocal performance and music education degree. So yeah, I was working on my, I think that when the first one happened, I was working on my sophomore recital for the year to meet the requirements for my degree. And so I had picked a couple pieces that I felt were really helpful to process pain. And that was also the same around the same time that I really started building friendships with the people that were in my choir at the time. I went to a small liberal arts school in the middle of nowhere called Augustana College, and the Augustana choir is the top choir in that school, and we did national tours, international tours, so lots of life experiences. But the friendships that I made in that group, I was probably the first time I actually like a friend of mine, one of the people that is in that choir, witnessed a panic attack of mine and was like, "This is called anxiety. You are experiencing anxiety. This is an anxiety attack." And
yeah.
I was shaking, and I felt like I couldn't breathe, and I was like blacking out. Like I was awful. I was sweating like crazy, and I was like huddled in a bathroom in the corner, and she was like helping me breathe, and clearly has anxiety. She clearly has anxiety and has also worked through everything. And she was like, "You're okay, like you're safe here." And we were singing some music that was like, I am not religious by any means, but I'm in awe of music that comes out of religious texts, and um, just like the hope and the feelings that come out of those, I can appreciate. And we were singing a song, and I like bawled my eyes out while we were all singing it, and it was a very cathartic experience. And so music was my main thing, and being in a choir, singing collectively with a group of people is like an experience. I want everyone to experience that at some point in time, where I don't know if you're it's Samuel Barber's Adagio for strings. I don't know if you've ever heard it. It's beautiful, but there's a choral version of it, and there's this moment where everything is building and building and building, and then there's this like silence, and then the whole choir takes this like collective breath, and then we keep singing, and it is. I cried. I cry every time I listen to it, regardless of if it's the original orchestral version or if it's the choral version. I cry every time. But I cried every time we sang it too. That and everyone, it's like this big collective. And I've learned just being creative with other people truly is the thing that saves my anxiety. It's not necessarily just being by myself, but it's a collective experience, knowing that I'm not alone, having human experiences with other human beings, that like solves my anxiety. I still have some every once in a while. Obviously, like the state of the world sucks, right? I mean, always, but like it kind of feels like the end of the world a lot recently. And again, I just lean into being around other people and creating with other people, and that helps.
There is this I'm sure he's Oscar nominated for this, Bradley Cooper. There's this most amazing 8-minute scene. And I read that Bradley Cooper did it once and it wasn't right. So he said, let's go in again and do it. But they were contemplating not doing it in one shot because it was so difficult. But he did it.
Oh.
And it's an 8-minute scene where he, as Leonard, conducts a choir and an orchestra in this amazing church. And it's just 8 minutes and it builds and it builds and it builds. I sat there in floods.
I bet.
Because and it's mostly about him and his. I mean, my husband did say at one point, he said, is this entirely necessary? Because the way Bradley was like, opening his mouth and exhaling and the arms are going and but for me, I was like, yes, it is, because his soul was not in his body at that point.
Yeah.
He was off somewhere to another place whilst conducting that orchestra. But it's the most amazing 8-minute scene. So you have to watch it and then message me and tell me
Oh, I will.
what you think.
Yeah.
Because I think you'll like it. But listen, Hannah, it's been fantastic.
Thank
I love
you.
where you are. I love this piece that's emanating from you.
Thank you.
And this grounded, lovely person that you are. So, I mean, thank you so
Right
much
back
for
at
crossing my path and for coming here.
Thank you.
It's been a joy. So
It's been so fun. We have to do it again.
We will.
Okay.